They say everything's bigger in Texas, and that's true for the petrochemical complex in Houston. And its footprint, along with all the other industries that support it, are growing, including the Houston Ship Channel. At 52 miles long, it's the largest port in the nation, valued at $439 billion to the state. It's undergoing its 11th expansion, known as Project 11, to the tune of $1 billion. The channel will reach a depth of 46.5 feet in some parts and be widened by 170 feet. The first portion was completed last year, leaving 7 set to be completed by 2027. This expansion is a godsend for industry and allows for larger ships and more traffic to pass through the port, but it also touches many communities along the way, including Galena Park. Galena Park is surrounded by industrial pollution, but there are also a few active dredge deposit sites from the Houston Ship Channel. Dredge is the soil-based material taken out of the channel for expansions or maintenance. The dredge material has been a source of concern and potential risk for neighborhoods like Galena Park and Pleasantville along the Ship Channel. The mounds dot their communities, and residents are often left without answers as to what dangers could be lurking in them. These sites are part of childhood memories for people like Juan Flores.
We used to go exploring a lot when we were kids, so we would actually go and play up in these dredge sites because what more was there to do? Like, we would find quicksand, and we would let ourselves sink halfway down and then pull each other out because it was so much fun for us. There used to be rainbow-colored water up there that I thought was so cool, and we would splash in it. Of course, now that I'm older, that wasn't the best thing for us to do, and who knows what we exposed ourselves to.
Juan's wife, Maria, is also concerned of what the dredge might contain. Environmental impact statements from the Houston Ship Channel Expansion Improvement Project in 2019 listed heavy metals, hydrocarbons, and ammonia within sediment samples. While the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is required to test soil at the channel, there is worry of cumulative risk in the dredge sites that the community members say remain untested. In an email to EHN, the Corps stated that they test the sediment before it leaves the channel and that, quote, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and Port Houston, the non-federal sponsor for the project, are in full compliance with applicable laws.
Dredging, it's like, I think a lot of people don't understand the environmental impact that this has, other than they see the mounds over there by just getting bigger. But they don't understand that when they're dredging, some of that material has a lot of the waste from the industry around the channel. When they bring it to our backyard and they're depositing there, and God knows what's in there. I went to a meeting where they said, oh, it's nothing bad. When we dredge, if it's too bad, we won't dredge it. But if it is, and then we'll deposit it. And my question, like many of the other residents, was, well, will you want me to do the same thing and just put it on behind your house? I mean, it's not that polluted, according to you. And a lot of them were just quiet because they don't want this.
The question was posed to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers representatives, the Port of Houston Authority's partner in this expansion. Here's what one said in response.
If I couldn't afford to live anywhere else, yes, I would. I would.
Amnesty International reported back in January that the tremendous economic value of the channel did not match the surrounding neighborhoods and coined them as sacrifice zones. According to the U.S. Census, neighborhoods surrounding the channel are predominantly people of color and are more likely to experience poverty and language barriers. Galena Park, for example, is about 92% Latino and 82% report speaking Spanish at home. 30.4% live in poverty. On top of this, they tend to live along the fence line and are more likely to experience disproportionate rates of pollution. The people that live here know that, according to the Environmental Protection Agency, living near these 200-plus facilities on the channel drastically reduces home values. That's if their home even has the potential to sell amidst the perceived risks. Not to forget additional health costs. According to a study last year from Air Alliance, the Ship Channel neighborhoods spend an extra $313 million a year from asthma-related health expenses. And some, like Juan, believe they've already become one of the sacrifices.
All my siblings got mad at me because they're like, you see, that's why we left, and you're the only one that chose to stay behind. And I'm like, it's my town. This is where I grew up. I've been here all my life, and, I've always fought to try to make this city better, and I want to continue to do that for the people who live here.
About 10 years ago, Juan began to work in the community through the nonprofit Air Alliance, which is dedicated to protecting clean air in Houston. Juan is now the air monitoring program manager and began doing so in Galena Park.
At first, it was more like, okay, well, I live in the area. I didn't know a lot either. I had to learn. Now people come up to me and like, well, you're an expert in this. I'm like, really? You consider me an expert?
Now, as Juan and Maria's children grow up, his fight continues. Juan remains concerned about the implications of Project 11. Port Houston expects environmental advantages from the 11th expansion. One of those expected benefits will be lower emissions from transporting goods on the channel and the ability to carry more on larger ships, allowing for less trips, according to Trey Campbell, Port Houston's Director of Environmental Affairs. When asked if this had proven true with previous expansions, Campbell said,
So from 97 to 2007, we saw a reduction once this is right after kind of the ship channel expansion had been completed. We actually saw a reduction in NOx emissions inside the Houston ship channel. So that did let us know that we were seeing that efficiency.
Campbell's environmental team also provided EHN with his data set from 1997 to 2007. While the data does show that the expansion caused each ton of cargo to have a lower emissions rate on average, emissions on the channel actually increased by about 1,400 tons because the tons of cargo increased. So the communities actually experienced more NOx pollution. NOxes, short for nitrogen oxides, are dangerous to the respiratory system, and long-term exposures can lead to chronic lung damage. NOxes can also contribute to form other types of harmful pollution, like ozone or particulate matter. In addition, the machinery used to dredge is typically a source of air pollution itself. Dredging can also disrupt local marine life and release potential pollutants into the sediment. But Campbell said,
It's a huge initiative for us, the deepening and widening of the channel. And we've been able to procure some of the cleanest dredges in the industry with some of the negotiations that we've been able to do with those contractors.
But as far as what's in the dredge at these deposit sites, the answer remains unclear. The EPA, Port Houston, and the Corps have convened on multiple occasions, but so far have only held a few public meetings. At the meeting previously mentioned, the Corps said that they had not tested the dirt piles on the sites themselves and that it was not in their protocol. Yet some of these sites have been active as far back as the 50s, with several loads of dredged dirt placed on them. With little answers from the government, three groups, the Environmental Defense Fund, Healthy Port Communities, and Lone Star Legal Aid, came together to test the soil last year. Results to these tests were released on June 12th of this year at a press conference. Naomi Yoder, researcher at the Buller Center for Environmental Health, said that the groups analyzed data from their own sampling and records they requested from the Corps. The group said that their sampling and research shows the presence of cancer-causing chemicals like arsenic, PCBs, and benzidine, and amounts above EPA risk levels. Yoder said that the datasets did not include soil samples from the dredge deposit sites themselves, and that the coalition was not granted access to obtain soil from them, and had to sample community areas nearby. The community groups asked for more testing and action from the Corps and Port.
It's time for a change. No more of this, we think, or we go in the water and get random samples. The samples are here. What's so hard about going right here, right now, and getting the dirt just blown into our neighborhoods?
The Corps did not respond to the coalition's findings. However, Port Houston issued a statement saying that, quote, Port Houston cares deeply about the health and safety of our neighboring communities, and we hear their concerns. We have seen no evidence of contamination or discharges at any of the dredged material placement areas that would pose a hazard to human health. On a similar note, the port broke export records in 2023 for the largest number of exports ever recorded in October, up 6% from the previous year. And this project hopes to fulfill that demand, make room for larger ships, and aid traffic. According to the port, most of these exports are resins and chemicals.
We meet with our communities on a very frequent basis, more than monthly, to talk about their concerns, to talk about things that we are working on. We're really engaged and want to collaborate with them and want to keep those lines of communication and transparency open.
In keeping with the theme of transparency, the bill for this project is split. Port Houston Authority, the local agency partnered with the Corps, is projected to pay 25% along with other private investors. And the remaining 75% of the project is projected to be paid for by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which have a troubled track record. As noted by ProPublica last year, the Corps has had a history of large construction projects that fall short on promises and often end up over budget. The report also noted that the Government Accountability Office concluded in 2006 that the Corps' work was, quote, fraught with errors, mistakes, and miscalculations, and used invalid assumptions and outdated data. It's not clear if taxpayer money was allocated to the Corps for this project at this time, but the Corps did receive $158 million from Biden's Inflation Reduction Act for the Houston Ship Channel. Port Houston says its own revenue funds the expansion projects. The port itself does receive partial funding from taxpayers and has received grants from taxpayer-funded institutions. Be sure to stay tuned for part 2 of this series where the theme of the ever-expanding petrochemical corridor continues. You'll meet Terry Blackwood of Baytown, who lives on the border of, quote, one of the largest integrated and most technologically advanced refining and petrochemical complexes in the world. This complex completed a $2 billion expansion just last year. Stories in this region tend to be shared. Find out how her story intertwines with Juan's.